They fail to realize that the majority of people, I would say the vast majority, are tired of it. Their only goal is to reduce the size of the government. They oppose allocating 8% of the BBC's budget to it. That is something they truly don't want to do. They are unwilling to cover the cost of bureaucrats' Politico subscriptions. There are two things going on with Trump when he trolls. First, he looks around at the spectrum of foreign policy challenges. He identifies certain issues he believes need to be addressed, and he knows these aren't eccentric or isolated concerns. Others have mentioned them before. Take Greenland, for example. Since World War II, many have noted that Greenland is part of North America. Strategically, it's incredibly important. The U.S. has long sought greater rights there, especially for military basing. Then Trump looks at Panama. He reflects on the 1979 treaty signed by President Carter, which gave the U.S. priority access to the Panama Canal at a discount rate. That treaty also stipulated that the canal should be free of foreign control. Now Trump sees China asserting influence in that zone, and he's alarmed. Then he turns to Canada. He notes they're under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, yet they don't pay their fair share of defense. Meanwhile, their southern border with the U.S. is wide open, and the country is led by a radical prime minister in Trudeau. Next, he focuses on Mexico. He sees that over $63 billion in remittances are flowing from the U.S. to Mexico annually. This is the largest source of foreign exchange for Mexico. Much of that money is being sent by anywhere from 12 to 20 million illegal aliens, many of whom receive public assistance in the U.S., which means American taxpayers are indirectly subsidizing these remittances. On top of that, Mexico allows massive caravans of migrants to cross its southern border with Guatemala and head directly for the U.S. So Trump sees all these interconnected problems. Then, in classic art of the deal fashion, he highlights them by being intentionally outrageous. If he were a traditional, sober, and judicious politician, he might say, "I'm very worried about China's role in Panama. There are ambiguities in the treaty. I'll appoint a bipartisan commission to examine this." But that's not how he operates. Instead, he'll say something like, "China's taking it over. We might have to go in there. I won't rule out using force." Or, "Why doesn't Greenland just become part of the United States? We'll buy it." Or, "The Gulf of Mexico? Why isn't it the Gulf of America?" Then he might say, "Canada, maybe it should become the 51st state." It's all deliberately outrageous, and it works. It gets attention, and suddenly people begin discussing the real issues. Because underneath the theatrics, there are real issues. There's also another layer to this. It's strategic trolling. The more people dismiss Trump as boisterous, divisive, or eccentric, as many Europeans do, the more they are forced to confront certain uncomfortable realities. And those realities often reveal deep ironies. Take the idea of renaming the Gulf of Mexico. Trump suggests calling it the Gulf of America. That sounds absurd on the surface. But then you look at the geography. The Gulf coastline is about 1,700 miles long on both the U.S. and Mexican sides. It's been called the Gulf of Mexico for 400 years. However, the idea of renaming everything has been put into the public conversation by the left. Nothing is off limits, including buildings, institutions, and even holidays. "Well, they changed names," Trump said. "Not me. I'll just make this one different. That's what it's been called for 400 years. Fantastic. It will now be referred to as the Gulf of America. It's fair. We share the coastline equally." That provokes a strong reaction from Mexico. Suddenly, they become willing to negotiate. They stop a caravan, and now there's an opening for dialogue. Or take Panama again. Trump points out the hypocrisy. They complain about U.S. imperialism, but now they've allowed Chinese influence to fill the vacuum. He tells them, "You're accusing us of being imperialists, but you're now a colony of China." When Denmark scolds him for interfering in internal matters, Trump turns the tables. He says, "You're a tiny European country with a colonial past. You still hold a vast territory in Greenland, which is geographically and culturally part of North America. And yet you're acting like it's the 18th century. He then points out that the distance from New York to Greenland is actually shorter than from Greenland to Copenhagen. That drives home the point. It's European colonialism in North America. Trump says, "Let the people of Greenland decide." He uses similar logic with Canada. "Maybe you should defend yourself," he says, We don't want you to be our colony, but we also don't want a one-sided trade deal. So if you want to be a true partner, close the border, establish reciprocal trade, and pay your fair share for defense. But if you continue acting like a colonial subject, we'll treat you like one. So there's irony woven through all these provocations. They're not random, they're meant to stir conversation and force quick action. The MAGA movement itself is evolving. It's not just traditional conservatives anymore. It includes voices from across the spectrum: RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, David Horowitz, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and others. There are actual policy conflicts raised by this wide alliance. For instance, consider tax reduction. The movement advocates for lower taxes for Social Security recipients, first responders, waiters, and veterans. The proposal is worth trillions of dollars. At the same time, voices like Elon and Vivek suggest reducing spending by $1 to $2 trillion. However, they claim that defense and entitlements are out of the question. Only roughly 30% of the budget remains after that. How do you get the numbers to work then? The theory is that if you cut taxes and boost the economy to 3% GDP growth, you'll recover the lost revenue. But historically, no one's ever done that. Cut taxes like Reagan did and actually managed to rein in spending. Reagan didn't, and neither did George W. Bush. Both ended up with deficits. The MAGA movement is now confronting that reality. They want to restore U.S. deterrence. But to do that without constantly using force, you sometimes have to project strength through optional action, which can require military buildup or intervention. That's another major challenge. Then there's the H-1B visa issue. The MAGA base says, we won't bring in foreign workers to do jobs Americans can do. But Elon and Vivek argue for bringing in high-skilled talent to power innovation in Silicon Valley. So where's the compromise? It might be this: if people are only coming in with bachelor's degrees, the U.S. has plenty of its own workers. But if they hold master's degrees, PhDs, and possess rare skills, then it makes sense to bring them in. It's a policy space where negotiation is needed. These debates arise because Republicans haven't won the popular vote in 20 years, since George W. Bush in 2004. They've lost 7 of the last 8 popular votes, so to break that pattern, the party had to expand. And Trump did that. He brought in record numbers of youth, Black, Hispanic, and disaffected Democrat voters. He also attracted tech money. But bringing more people to the table also brings more conflicting ideas. Now, under the new Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, we're seeing big changes. Among all the controversial Trump picks, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, it was Pete Hegseth who drew the fiercest resistance. J.D. Vance had to break a tie for his confirmation. Why? Because Hegseth wants radical reform at the Pentagon. The Pentagon is almost impervious to criticism, despite the fact that we currently spend $820 billion annually on defense, or 14% of the federal budget. We manufacture $140 million F-22s, $85 million F-35s, and $14 billion aircraft carriers. In the meantime, conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine are demonstrating how contemporary warfare is evolving. It concerns high-volume, reasonably priced drone warfare on land, in the air, and at sea. Hegseth wants to revolutionize how we procure military equipment. Right now, defense contracting is dominated by a few corporations: Raytheon, Northrop, Lockheed, General Dynamics. High-ranking generals retire and take positions with these companies, often using their military connections to influence contracts. It's not necessarily corrupt, but it's a built-in conflict of interest. Hegseth aims to end that. He supports returning to a civilian Secretary of Defense as originally intended. Though Generals Mattis and Austin were capable men, the law against appointing recent military officers to that role exists for a reason. He's also cutting DEI programs, diversity, equity, inclusion, which he sees as bloated and non-essential. These changes are saving billions. Recruitment has surged, reversing a 40,000 to 50,000 deficit in new enlistees. The military previously downplayed this crisis. Now it's being addressed. Socially, Hegseth is connecting with rank-and-file troops. He lifts weights with them. He jogs with them. He's becoming a People's Secretary of Defense. He's also cracking down on retired officers who violate Article 88 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice by publicly insulting civilian leaders. In recent years, we've seen generals call their commander-in-chief fascist, Nazi-like, Mussolini-esque, with zero consequence. That will no longer be tolerated. Under Hegseth, procurement, recruitment, and ethics will all look different. DEI programs will be cut, and the military will focus not on race, gender, or religion, but on character and combat capability. The left is running out of ideas. Like addicts, they are hooked on melodrama and identity politics. But deep down, they know it's destroying them. People want real debates. They want solutions, not slogans. But the left can't stop. They're trapped in a cycle, zombies of a failed ideology. Regarding the French monarchy that was reinstated following the revolution, Talleyrand, the French foreign secretary, once remarked, "They have learned nothing and they have forgotten nothing." And that remains true to this day.